So that's what I'm saying. The text is like an object. It's gonna change perspective based on where you're standing.
I don't know.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I missed you, baby sweet. It was a day.
It was a day.
Please tell me you're seeing this too.
From Seattle, we're Drinking the Movies. I'm Taylor Baker.
And I'm Michael Clausen.
Oh, hey, Michael.
Hey, Taylor. How's it going?
It's going, man. We're back to remote recording this week. I think that we're probably going to have a shortage of episodes. We should probably warn the listeners about holiday seasons coming up, and we've each got different trips and priorities. So I think we're probably going to only have maybe 3 more episodes before the end of the year. Does that sound right?
That sounds about right. Yeah, COVID continues to rage. Get-togethers for the holidays become complicated. We'll record as best we can in between all of that organizational finagling.
Yes,
but yeah,
rescreenings will stay
more.
on schedule. We'll have one of those in the first week or so of every month. And then we'll be doing privately quite a bit of binge watching to make sure that we have accurate lists for our January recording of the best of. And yeah, I think that's most of the housekeeping in general.
Yeah, seems very possible that by the time we convene in January for a list of best of the year episode, we'll be talking about some films that we hadn't even covered yet on the show because of how much is kind of coming out in the next 6 weeks or so.
Yes, yeah, that. The lump of movies that's going to come out is truly unprecedented. I didn't know Let Them All Talk was going to come out in December. I don't know about you. I thought it was getting pushed.
Well, and I know Wonder Woman 84 will probably top your list, right?
I think that there's 0% chance that it even makes it onto my considerations, buddy.
Oh, I thought you were going to say even onto your TV screen.
If I go spend time with certain family, I guarantee that we'll probably put that on.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good chance I will too. Christmas Day, that is exactly what I will do after snowboarding, perhaps. Just zone out, maybe fall asleep. Perfect.
Yeah, it'll be on the TV. I don't know if I'll watch it.
Yeah. Good deal.
All right, let's get on to first impressions and start with Let Them All Talk.
Did she always talk like that?
I'm going to start work on my manuscript. Swim at 3, dinner at 7, back to work, or bed, or both. I'll probably work in bed.
I kind of feel like I'm spending time with 3 almost like...
Dinosaurs.
No.
You believe Alice and her book determined your whole life?
The consequences on my life of her actions were unacceptable.
Want to go have a drink later? No, I can't.
I just don't know who you are anymore. Does anybody trust you?
We really lost each other.
All right, Michael, that was the trailer for Steven Soderbergh's Let Them All Talk. What do you think?
I think this looks like a pretty good time. I think I saw it comes out on December 10th, if I caught that correctly, right around the corner. Very exciting. I think the performances look pretty fun. I like that these are, super talented, famous actresses, but these are kind of relatively laid back, fairly easygoing performances from the looks of it. Looks fairly kind of light in tone, has kind of a nice snappy rhythm to it and fairly witty. I think this looks like a good time. What about you?
I agree. As I normally do with Steven Soderbergh movies, I'm looking forward to this. I think Diane Wiest looks very, very good here. She's given kind of third fiddle, it looks like, almost second fiddle, and she can really sing in those types of roles where she can really just pop a zinger in a sentence and just kind of floor you after the other actor has had a monologue, say. So the punctuation that she can deliver here, I'm pretty excited for. Additionally, Soderbergh's been obsessed with a television show called Below Deck. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's like a reality television show about cruise ships and like the restaurant on the cruise ship, as well as like the staff and crew of the ship, and all the melodrama and drama that happens like a reality television show. And I think that him getting to channel all that energy that he has about that show into a film is, I think this is going to be very good.
I swear, if we had some tally machine that kept a record of all the different directions that we mentioned on the show, Soderbergh has to be near the top of the list mentions wise, right?
I believe that is correct. And I take sole responsibility for that joy that I bring every listener.
I think you had something to do with that. Yeah.
Just manufacturing. Well, all right. Enough of Steven Soderbergh, the famed director, Steven Soderbergh. On to Pieces of a Woman, starring Vanessa Kirby.
I wanted the baby to decide when she wanted to come.
My daughter came into this world. For the time that she did.
And I can't bring her back.
Martha, is that you? How are you?
60 to 70% of these cases, we rarely find a satisfactory explanation. There's certain things medically we just don't have answers for. Very sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
All right, we just watched the trailer for Cornell Mundruczko's Pieces of a Woman, starring Vanessa Kirby and Shia LaBeouf. When you introduced this, I know you said it stars Vanessa Kirby, but not Shia LaBeouf. Should I read into that?
I know essentially nothing about this movie, and then I just watched the trailer. I try to do that normally for all of our first impressions titles. I try not to know anything. Soderbergh obviously is an exception because I'm just reading his website quite often. That's just a personal preference thing. I try not to know anything. And Pieces of a Woman I've heard a lot about, but didn't want to know anything more than Vanessa Kirby. I'm thrilled that Shia is in this. I think that what he did in the trailer looks like fantastic work, great supporting actor work. He's really good at that. I think that he's overlooked for his role in Nymphomaniac, and I see a lot of that type of ambiance here to the role that he's playing. I am thrilled that you said the name of the director because I won't even attempt. This looks fantastic, and I think you're going to be upset, but I believe that this is where we have to have the conversation. What's a 2020 film and what's a 2021 film, Michael? It says select theaters December. It's not actually available for you and I to watch until January. This is Hostiles all over again.
Oh, to me, this will definitely be 2020. It'll be on everybody's 2020 lists. I think just because it's getting the theatrical release under the wire in 2020, I think it'll be on the 2020 scoreboard for me.
But how many people are actually going to have seen it in 2020?
Yeah, but that was the same thing with like Little Women last year. You always get a couple of those. I think Silence,
Little
Phantom
Women
Thread.
was wide release.
Yeah, for sure.
In Christmas. A wide release theatrical launch is totally different than a COVID limited theatrical release when New York and California are shut down essentially. So like what theater is it actually playing?
Yeah, I have to imagine everybody will primarily put this on their 2020 list if you're looking at the major publications.
You're right, but I think I'm going to put it on my 2021 probably.
gonna save it. See how the 2020 list looks, and be like, I'll save it and start out strong with 2021.
In general, I try to do it like out of the actual year in which I watched it. So like, if a 2019 movie came out in 2019 and I didn't get a chance to see it till this year, I'll include it in this year's list. In general, I mean, there's definitely a fine line there, but since I will not be able to see this unless we can get a screening copy before the end of the year, it's going to be a 2021 for me. It's going to be a hostile situation.
Fair enough. Yeah. So this director, Cornel Mundruczko, I'll try that one more time, even though I'm sure that is incorrect. He directed White God, which I did not realize until now, but I remember that film. I don't know if you saw that one. I cannot wait for some pieces to come out that try to explore the common themes between the movie about the dogs and a woman's grieving over her miscarriage. I think that is a fascinating follow-up.
I think you're leaping to a miscarriage. I don't know that that's what happened. It sounded like it might have been a successful birth and then a death.
That could be too. Yeah, a lost child in some way or another. Yep. Certainly possible. But yeah, I would second most of what you said. I think it looks really good.
Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. We recently joined as members, and you can too. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co.
All right. Let's dig right into it with Abel Ferrara and Willem Dafoe in Sportin Life.
I participate in helping make the frame. I love it when I play with the camera.
Hi. Buongiorno. Sono Abel Ferrara. Sono un regista.
There's a wisdom of the body. That's a very important part of performing. And that's what gets you going, because characters are revealed through actions, and I think the best part of performing is how you melt into the action. You know, it sounds kind of zen, but it is, you know. It's really about the quality of engagement. That, for me, is the most attractive kind of performing, where you can disappear into not the role so much as the things you're doing. Have a kind of attention and a kind of openness and a kind of flexibility and wonder that we don't normally have in life.
All right, Michael, this is a 61-minute documentary, quote unquote, about the life of Willem Dafoe and Abel Ferrara and their working relationship essentially in like the last decade. As far as I can tell, we got some Pasolini in there. It looked like we got some Tommaso. What do you think about this documentary?
It's an interesting little documentary. It's streaming online for free. I think we both watched it at thefilmstage.com. I think it's on IndieWire too, although the IndieWire link was not working super well for me. It does feel pretty tossed together to me, and like a project that required fairly minimal effort, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. I think some aspects are a little more interesting than others. It has kind of a collage-like feel just because of the variety of clips versus footage of Willem and Abel on press tours versus pandemic footage that I did not expect, given the description of the documentary. So I enjoyed this. I'll start there, but there are some things I liked more than others. What about you?
I liked the parts where Willem and Abel were talking. I thought that most of the rest of it was pretty off key and didn't actually have a point. And the general thrust of that ends up being that the documentary is essentially about nothing, but has moments in which I reveled. And that almost makes up for a lot of the stuff, but it doesn't make up for all of it, which means that I feel like really charitably I could give this a 3, but more realistically it's probably like a 1.5 as a film project. Sure.
Yeah. I could not in good conscience recommend this to anybody who wasn't familiar with probably both Willem Dafoe and Abel Ferrara and was just particularly keen on getting a sense of their personalities and their working relationship a little bit.
Mhm.
That's kind of enough for me. I kind of like that. And I kind of like the fact that while this is largely about like the promotion of Siberia earlier this year, that it's just kind of acknowledging the world at large. You know, I think it would be, it's kind of this interesting balance of ego and modesty by looking back on that event, the birth of this movie into the world, while recognizing that like that was the last thing on anybody's mind at the time it came out. But I also don't think any of the pandemic footage shows you anything you don't already know, or that he really has anything to say about it.
No, it felt genuinely gimmicky, in the sense that both Willem and Abel reside in Italy, and like all the footage we get is essentially like of American government or another national area, and like what they're going through, or like the subways of New York with plague masks. There's no reflection of what it is in Italy, which would actually be like a sincere interaction at some level. So I really don't understand at all what the project was aiming for in that sense.
Yeah, the most you get in terms of his reflecting on the experience in Italy is him wandering around when there's nobody outside and saying, "There's nobody out here, bro." And that's about it. That's the extent of it. So yeah, not much there. Yeah, I mean, it's 60 minutes long. I don't think this is asking too much of your time. That's why like there's just not even enough there for me to dislike it necessarily, but certainly not a work of great craft. But I just don't mind always getting a more and more of a sense of the personalities of these artists, and what that relationship kind of looks like. I know he says at one point that this is a documentary about documentary filmmaking. I don't really buy that at all. I don't think it reveals to me anything about documentary filmmaking. But okay, sure.
That I don't know how to make sense of that. Did he really say that it's a documentary about documentary filmmaking? I don't think I caught that.
Yeah, I think verbatim. Or it's a documentary about documentaries or something like that.
There's nothing in this about a documentary at all. It's just about like his life and the way that he sees the world. I think you mentioned the word ego earlier. I think that's great. And I think that what makes that a great point is Willem constantly, you know, reaffirming Abel's ego essentially in front of us in like this really complimentary, lovely friendship way that just reminds you of like Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks or something, you know, where it's just these two partners who are slowly going into the sunset together, and making these great points. And I liked this documentary most when Willem was making a point about, you know, modern working life and how in many ways it's better to have your work be part of your personal relationships, when they're reflecting on life and like more interesting pieces of philosophy rather than, you know, the asides to him playing music or you know, random footage of him signing a poster at Berlinale and then watching a government official from America speak about COVID.
Totally. I don't really get anything out of the musical portions of the film. That just it just feels like filler content. They're like, we got to get this thing at least up to an hour somehow. Keep filming the show.
I think what they saw was they were like, oh, we have an opportunity. He said the word filmmaking is like rhythm. Now we're just going to put in guitar.
Yeah, we should say that I think this was financed or part of a project associated with Saint Laurent, the fashion designer. Aren't they a fashion designer? Yeah.
I believe so.
I don't know if I've ever seen a project that was, you know, put on by or financed by a fashion designer quite like this, or that ever really worked for me. I feel like these always feel a little tossed together and done for a paycheck, perhaps. I'm kind of surprised that like Saint Laurent even bothered once they saw this. They're like, what is this?
Well, in a time when content is, you know, thinning out almost, or the brief time when it seems like now we've got a rebound. I don't know. I think that this makes for a good promotional material to go in the extra of extra featurettes of Siberia. But I can never see this standing on its own 2 feet being distributed for theatrical release for viewers. This is just so meandering and unfocused and unfortunately unthoughtful, despite the moments of deep insight from the 2 central figures.
You get Willem Dafoe with a fantastic mustache, like the best one I've ever seen. Although I think he might have one in The Lighthouse. Maybe that is competition, but boy, does it look good.
Yeah, I will agree to that. It sure does. I mean, what else is there to talk about with this documentary? You've got Willem Dafoe's facial hair. You've got Abel making some fun repartees about, life and the way that he sees it. And then you get a bunch of kind of filler gunk. You get some religiosity for a bit. I think there was a very funny moment early on in the film that totally went over my head until much later, where Abel asked Willem, how old is Christ? And I was like, what? And then like 30 minutes later, I remembered that he played Christ in The Passion of the Christ. And that's what he was talking to him about. I was like, oh, okay. That's like a fun little moment. But aside from those fun little moments, the structure of the thing is just bad.
Yeah, there were a couple little factoids that caught my ear or caught my eye or whatever. There was one where they're talking about some of the pictures that are in Siberia, kind of towards the end of Siberia, and Willem says that those are actually fake pictures of his family. That was kind of interesting. I remember being curious about what those were because they come out of nowhere in Siberia. There's some little tidbits, but no great theme here to really chew on.
Yeah, I mean, there's that other moment where Ferrara says, Ulysses is always coming home. It's not that he doesn't put a lot of thought into his films. It's about the rhythm of it, the bump, a bump, a bump, a bump, a bump. And I think that that's very interesting to hear from him. We're about to talk about Sidney Lumet at the end of the show and his film network. He also was very much a practical filmmaker. He says that any great linguistic or any deeper meaning to his films is not from him, in fact, but from the material or the performers. He's just there to do the job of making the film come to life. And I think that Ferrara is very much of that practical attitude. So I did find those little tidbits interesting, but once again, beyond that cinephilia morsel that he's giving me, there's not much to enjoy here.
For Ferrara aficionados, perhaps watch it online
for free. Let me ask you the infamous question, Michael. Do you have a favorite scene?
Yeah, I do. I think it was pretty funny when Ferrara's in an interview with Willem Dafoe, and he has this one-liner, this little metaphor about old keys not opening new doors, and everyone's reaction to that, they're like, oh, dang, you got some wisdom here. Okay. I thought that was pretty funny. Probably the one scene in this movie that made me laugh. I enjoyed that. What about you?
I'll go with the second scene that made me laugh, because that did make me laugh when Willem just kept congratulating him about his deep wisdom. It's when Willem puts a photo of Abel Ferrara over his crotch and begins making it talk. I found that quite amusing. I don't remember the exact details of what he said, but just that was such a fun moment to see the relationship that these two men have together. And the
Ferrara's, they could do. Yes, sorry to cut you off. It just totally seconding it. He has such a distinctive kind of craggy voice, Ferrara. So Defoe's impression, hilarious. You're right. That's the funnier moment for sure.
All right, let's get on to the dark and the wicked.
Halfway trials and temptations. Is there trouble and joy? What a friend we had. was saying things. She would sit right beside him, just whispering. But she wasn't talking to him.
We found it in her pocket. She didn't believe in God.
What's the matter whether he believed?
I found Mom's diary.
What if she saw something out there? Told y'all not to come.
All right, Michael, we watched this movie. Anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, oddly enough, even though we described Sportin Life as barely even a documentary, I think I might have more to say about that one than this film, The Dark and the Wicked, from Brian Bertino, who both wrote the script and directed.
He made The Strangers as well.
He made The
Quite
Strangers.
famously.
He made a film called The Monster with Zoe Kazan. I saw that one as well, which I also did not care for. I had heard some good things about this film, The Dark and the Wicked, and that put it on my radar, but I was disappointed, and it sounds like you were as well.
Yes, I was continuously disappointed. I was like, well, maybe. He's got a chance here. And I just kept giving him rope, and he just kept on hanging himself, as well as the mother.
Ooh. Oh, spoiler alert. I love it.
So, I mean, just in general, this is one of those times where I just can't excuse the foreshadowing, where I know everything that's going to happen. And we're going to talk about full spoilers here. So if you don't want that, turn off the episode or skip to network, because I knew that the fingers were going to get cut off. You could tell by the tone of the movie that was going to happen. You could tell he was going to kill himself and that they weren't really there, because the movie had established that was going to occur. You could tell that the nurse was going to be involved in some depraved finale act. You didn't know if she was being possessed by the devil or if she was going to kill herself like the other people, but you knew that something was going to happen. I knew that the fucking spider was going to come out of the guy's mouth because they had set it up tonally. Like, there's just so much blatant foreshadowing in this screenplay, in this film, that is inexcusable.
A little CGI spider, right? I do not think that thing was actually on her face.
Correct. CGI spider.
Yeah. Fair. Predictability doesn't help it. For me, it partly just doesn't help that this feels like it's just the next iteration on kind of an ongoing theme in horror right now, about one horror film after another, at the end of the day, wanting us to say that it's ultimately really about grief. And I'm just getting a little tired of different takes on that theme. I'm just ready for some new material. Maybe if this had come out 10 years ago or something like that, pre-Babadook, I would have felt differently. I think that theme is getting a little tired for me. And I guess you could maybe commend it for some tonal consistency. This is pretty bleak and dark and dour top to bottom, but for me, it actually just got kind of exhausting. I was really ready for some variation in tone, not more of the same darkness, and maybe that's just me, but I thought it got a little old.
Yeah, I think that right when it starts, you can tell. I mean, I don't know when this was written. It could have been written a long time ago, and now it's just finally getting made. But the direct similarity to Hereditary has to be kind of acknowledged in general. I haven't seen the Babadook. You're probably totally right that it's in line with that grief as well. But the beginning of the film has some good, I won't say great, cinematography, has a decent idea of leading you into like a brooding type of a horror that felt like it had promise. And then it graduates into like the lowest form of like the B genre that it's interacting with. It's like grief. Okay, we're gonna establish the creepy moments, and then we're gonna cut her fingers off, and then she's gonna go kill herself, and then there's going to be a scream, and then they're not going to run away until it's too late, and then the other one's going to stay. And that, I mean, just formulaically, it's a very general horror screenplay premise that you've seen regurgitated hundreds of times by now if you go back to like the 70s B horror films. There's nothing offered new here. There's really nothing that feels sincere. I think that the reason that The Strangers is so fun is because you kind of follow the villain, and here you never get a sense of fun. I think in your review you mentioned levity that never comes. Great point, because as you said, the tone becomes tragically monotonous, and you just know exactly what you're getting. And because you know exactly what you're getting from that monotony and the lack of levity, like I said, you can predict every single beat that's going to come, because these characters were introduced in this way, then they were taken away, now they're coming back for this one moment. So you can tell that all of it's just kind of bullshit to get you to the point that they're trying to make, which is a very insincere, pointless point. And that's why the film ends up failing, because it doesn't have two legs that are original to stand on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I should say that I think I'm okay with the point. I mean, we should say just very briefly, story-wise, it's about a grown brother and sister who come back to their home, their parents' home in rural Texas. It's on a farm. Their dad's deathly ill. He's bedridden. Their mom has urged them not to come for reasons that are never exactly specified. And they discover that some kind of demon, perhaps the devil himself, is there on the farm with them. And it escalates into scares from there that escalate in degree. But yeah, the themes that we're talking about are one, perhaps them grappling with this father's impending death, and then two, as you mentioned, not too long into the film, the mother hangs herself as well. So there's also this kind of
first 10 minutes.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm okay with the movie having those themes that it wants to tackle about these grown children grappling with that stuff. I think the theme is fine, but I think it leads you to think you are clever for uncracking its metaphor, and I think the metaphor is just too blatantly obvious. Especially after so many horror movies have done this in recent years.
Yeah, I think we might disagree there. I think that the way that the theme arrives is part of the thing that makes the theme reasonable or have purpose. And I think that the theme we're presented with is fine in Hereditary. It is fine, and it comes at night in a different way, grappling with death. But here you have, very just basic by the book filmmaking that isn't trying to say anything deeper than the premise of the theme. And that's where there's a problem, right? Like Ari Aster in Hereditary introduces a lot of I would say filmmaking goodness on top of a very engaging story that's full of surprises and fun. I mean, there's just no real sincerity here. There's the writer sat down and came up with the theme he wanted to tell you about, and then he just made a movie that the hammer just hits the nail on the head in the most dull, monotonous tone possible.
Yeah, I think it is quite creepy at times. I will give it that. I think there are some genuinely decent scares. There is one shot where the brother goes to the window and sees his mom floating out in the yard. Creepy shot. That gave me the chills a little bit. I think there's some decent bits of directing here, but not to get repetitive, but I think it gets repetitive.
Yeah, I will absolutely concede that he is successful in crafting moments of terror or horror.
Mm-hmm.
However, the sacrifice for doing that is that the entire rest of the film is very much empty. It does not have the pulse of, something, not even at the peak of horror filmmaking, but just something more in between. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but the story never feels like it is for itself. It feels like it is there to serve the objective of scaring the audience and delivering the theme at the end.
Yeah, it's funny. Usually, I feel like within horror franchises, you can usually sense a some one-upsmanship that they're going for from film to film. I kind of feel like you're seeing this within one single film here, as it just kind of escalates in intensity, but it's not getting any more interesting. So, yeah, we're not too positive on this one.
No, I will say I think Marin had some interesting deliveries in her performance. She's really not ever given much to do. Here she was given a little bit more. I do think that she should be kept an eye on. I think that as she gets older, there's probably going to be more roles for her to graduate into. And I do think that she's one of those actresses who may increase with her renown as she ages.
I would agree. I did like her quite a bit. I was less enthused with the actor, Michael Abbott.
Yeah.
He was pretty forgettable for me, unfortunately.
Flat.
Pretty flat. He kind of looked like Roy from The Office, in my opinion. Kind of should have just cast him. I kept thinking of Brightburn. Wasn't he in Brightburn?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. I think
that's not a good thing when you're thinking about Brightburn while watching a movie. That's never good.
Not good, but yeah, I would second that Marin Ireland is probably the bright spot here.
I don't have much more. Do you have a favorite scene?
Probably the one I mentioned. The shot that spooked me the most was his seeing his mom floating around out in the farm. What about you?
I don't really remember the specifics of it, but it's one of the first shots in like the first 3 minutes. There's just an outdoor shot, great focus. I think it's tracking as the actor gets out of his truck and the sun's kind of rising. It's just really well lit, nice little tracking shot around the vehicle, and then it cuts, unfortunately. And it's little moments like that where you see this director cutting his own footage too much, where just a longer lingering scene where I can follow a full track would have gone so far in a film like this. There's so many moments where they walk through a door, and rather than showing the door get closed behind them, it's just boom, end of shot, cut to the next thing. And instead of having that long, lengthy cinematography that can really kind of push up or bump up the material that's being shown.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure I'm thinking of the exact same scene you're talking about, or we're talking about at the beginning. But if it's the one I'm thinking of, is it around sunset? I remember there were a couple of shots that I actually thought were like gorgeous.
Yeah. Here I'm literally just going for the best looking shot, because there were some, especially in the beginning, that I thought just looked real good.
Totally. They are at the beginning though, huh?
Yeah. And I was like, this is exciting. And then it just got worse and worse and worse. But alas, let's get on to Sidney Lumet's Network.
What the hell's going on?
Prepare yourself for a perfectly outrageous motion picture.
Howard Beale went up there last night and said what every American feels, that he's tired of all the bull.
Sakes, Diana, we're talking about putting a manifestly irresponsible man on national television.
I am not putting Howard back on the air.
It's not your show anymore, Max. It's mine.
I got a feeling I'm being made.
You are.
Got to warn you, I don't do anything on my first date.
We'll see. I want a show developed based on the activities of a terrorist group.
Well, Ahmed, I want to make a TV star out of you. Just like Archie Bunker.
You're the #1 show in television!
We're number one! There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and DuPont and Exxon. And you have meddled with the primal forces of nature. And you will atone.
All right, Michael. We are going to be covering Sidney Lumet's Dog Day Afternoon, so we thought it would be fun to punch up this episode with a little bit of homework on Sidney. What'd you think of Network?
I really enjoyed Network. Yeah, lots to talk about here, from themes to performances to maybe a little bit about Lumet's direction and in style, but I'll leave it there just to get your take. Very positive on it. What about you?
I'm also positive on it. I don't know where I'm, somewhere between 4 and 4.5, I think. Don't know which way I'm leaning. This is definitely one of his better films that I've seen. And the screenplay and the dialogue exchanges, I think, are just excellent. You have some sumptuous office cinematography, which I'm always a fan of, because there's nothing quite so drab as an office. And whenever it looks really good, like it did last year in Dark Waters, I'm always quite thrilled. He's got some great moments of capturing the lights being reflected off of the glass behind Faye Dunaway in one portion of the film. So I'm quite positive on it as well.
Yeah. We have some fairly big heavy hitters cast-wise. We have kind of the 4 big players are Faye Dunaway, William Holden, Peter Finch, and Robert Duvall. Ned Beatty has a notable supporting supporting performance. He's the CEO of the company, right? Or maybe I think he's the CEO. Yeah. It's about a television network whose ratings are basically in the dump. It begins with one particular anchor whose news program
Howard, right?
That's Howard Beale, played by Peter Finch. His ratings are particularly low, and as the film gets going, he announces on the air that he's going to kill himself a week from that day, live on the news, and
a very funny scene. A very funny scene, because the production studio, everyone's not paying attention and has their headphones off, besides like one PA who's on the shooting floor outside the studio. So they have no idea that he's just announced he's going to commit suicide. And then the PAs run in and no one believes them for a little bit. It's a nice little hammy scene.
Totally. That's a great scene, especially because like the network's problem is that nobody's watching the news. Nobody's watching it. And not even they are watching the news. And they totally missed this. That's brilliant and super funny. And there's some repetition there where I think, like, if I'm remembering correctly, someone comes in and they're like, Howard just said he's going to kill himself on the news. And then they're like, did Howard just say he's going to kill himself on the news? Yeah, Howard said he's going to kill himself on the news next week.
Yeah,
there's some repetition. And throughout the script, there are little callbacks and echoes like that I think are really funny.
I 100% agree. It's I think it's the dialogue of the screenplay with Sidney's direction for shooting really good looking scenes that's the reason why this thing works. Because without the dialogue, if you just go off the premise, it wouldn't be that interesting. But it's because you can get lost in these characters and the relationships they have with each other that this really delivers. I think something that's very much in that fairy tale genre, where it's a parable, if you will, about things in general, where someone's unhappy, they say they're going to kill themselves, and then we have our ending in which the thing that he had said would happen happens in a different way against his will.
Yeah, and was definitely satire. This is satire about the kind of decline of television news from fact-based journalism into sensational programming. One of my favorite kind of aspects of the story is that Faye Dunaway's character Diane isn't someone within the news part of the organization who comes up with this idea. I like that she's coming from narrative programming and the problems with that someone without a journalistic background would be the showrunner for this. And it just further gets at that idea that this is the creation of infotainment, because that she's coming from entertainment. She's like, this, if we want ratings, this should be not news, this should be entertaining. I think that's a clever switch. Yeah, for sure.
I think it's relevant to contemporary life in quite a big way. as we watch cable news networks die and they continue to generate more features. You know, I do think that's an astute point that the film makes. I love that it was happening so early on. There's a moment in which the man who has left his wife for Faye Dunaway near the end says, "Why am I even writing this book about the grand old days of network news television? There were no grand old days of network news television. This is all bullshit. Nobody wants to read this." And I love that scene so much.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. What else? I kind of like that there is a scene where Diana is pitching her idea for the program, and she talks, I think it's to Howard, not to Howard, it's to Max, Max Schumacher, the head of the news department.
Yes.
And is talking to him about how their shift towards sensationalism has already started, and she's just leaning into it, and because that's how they're going to have success. She said something like, you only had a minute and a half of news on last night's program anyways. The rest of it was car accidents, the story of a baby. Don't tell me, that you've really retained your standards. So I like that she is not just the one, she's not totally bringing this about herself. She is capitalizing on a trend that the news people have already kind of let happen, and is just pouring more gas on the fire, I guess.
Yeah, I already mentioned to you that I think that right when this film ends, you should just start right up with Putney Swope on the helicopter, have him get out with the briefcase and go do the takeover of the board. But I also think that this movie would be a great pairing with Nightcrawler. I think that there's a lot of similarities between them that would have been a very interesting perspective piece or like a feature to read about the differences in depicting violence and purposeful storytelling that's false inside of that. Because by the end of Nightcrawler, well, you know what happens.
Very similar themes that they are taking, for sure.
Yeah. I do want to mention the beginning of Network, which I think has one of the greatest pieces of dialogue exchange from the 1900s cinema, in which Howard and his friend, who had been the head of the network but is then pushed off, who's dating Faye Dunaway. I don't remember what that actor's name is or his character name, unfortunately, but they're having this interaction at the bar. Great close-up, dark screen, and he's talking about killing himself and how good those ratings are going to be, and the back and forth, just pitter patter of that dialogue for those first 5 minutes, I think is just some of the most memorable, sharp film between two characters talking to each other that I can think of from the 1900s.
Yeah, totally. I know exactly what you're talking about. That's within the first few minutes, and that was one of the things I had in my notes. They're talking about the kinds of television they know would sell. Mm-hmm. And Max, the guy you're talking about, not the news anchor, his boss essentially is describing some things on that would sell. He says suicides, assassinations, mad bombers, mafia hitmen, murder in the barbershop, and he kind of goes on. And that's all, like, he's clearly being sarcastic. Maybe partly serious, but he knows it would actually sell. And then it's not too many scenes later that Faye Dunaway's character, Diana, is describing the kinds of content she wants for real. And she's dead serious.
The same thing.
Yeah, and she says maybe they'll take movies of themselves kidnapping heiresses, hijacking 747s, bombing bridges. It's like the switch from sarcasm to reality. It's really funny, and there's kind of a callback even in that pitter patter that you're talking about. Mm-hmm. They mean it sarcastically. She means it as what will sell.
Well, I don't think Howard meant it sarcastically when he said he was going to kill himself.
Not that part, no.
Yeah, for the shares. So yeah, I think that there was a level of sincerity, though not something that he wanted. I think that he was like stating a fact that that's what sells, but not that he wants that.
Right. Yeah, there is a difference. Like, Howard is genuinely losing it. Max, when he's talking about that stuff, I think is more
business perspective removed, aware that this is what his managers want, but not something that he wants as a human.
And he knows that's what the people want.
Mhm.
I do like that this is a satire of not just them leaning into this sensational kind of news, but the fact that they know people will eat it up. I
Mhm.
think the film is aiming at the audiences just as much as the content creators, I guess.
Yeah, it's very much, just a continuation of the public hanging, essentially, where everybody just wants to go watch. Um, what do you think of the constant um, back, or what would that be? The constant mentioning of "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." That slowly builds up in the film.
Oh, I think it's hilarious. Partly, I mean, the idea that just the power of catchphrases and slogans over facts and reason is, I think it gets at that idea pretty effectively, especially because you yourself kind of want to yell it at some points, and it's just too funny to watch Howard start yelling that at the first point. I think that's like such a hilarious arc he has. It's practically like a metamorphosis between the just everyday kind of boring news anchor to this preacher like wacko is just so funny. I mean, it is justifiably a famous line.
Yes,
I kind of answer your question. So back to you.
I think that I didn't quite realize the first maybe 3 times it occurs that it was a double entendre. Because he's literally going mad.
I see.
And
what you mean.
he's inciting people to say the word mad in the context that he means it. Meanwhile, the context that he means it is coming from a madman. So I do think that by the end it is truly a hilarious line, because all these people are saying this thing that a madman is telling them to say.
Yeah,
which
totally.
is even more poignant than I think the other points that the film makes.
Yeah, you use the word poignant, which it's not the first word that would have come to mind, but it is poignant. There are poignant aspects of this when you think about the fact that Howard collapses at the end of each of these shows. The dude needs help, but people are cheering euphorically at each collapse, which are funny. But you're right; they are also poignant. Like, this guy is not in good shape.
Well, there, in particular, near the end, there is a part where he does that. Then there's a slow zoom in. It's a great shot on his body, and you can't tell if he's supposed to be lifeless or not. You can see his chest rising, but you don't know if that's just filmmaking in the rush, where they just couldn't get a scene where it didn't show his chest rising and falling, so they just left that in. So you don't really know that he's alive until quite a bit later, when he's still alive on like a television screen.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting that in many ways the movie is not subtle. Like, the news network people, say exactly what it is they're thinking and what they're going to do. Like, I think Diane at some points explicitly says, like, the people want someone to express their rage. Like, that's exactly what they want. You don't even have to do any really like reading between the lines, but the dialogue never reads as heavy-handed or obvious. And I think that's partly just kind of rhythm and the passion in some of the speeches. They feel like speeches. People, this is kind of loud acting. There's lots of literal yelling. The way, like, the subtext kind of just feels like the text in a way. They say exactly what it is that they want to do.
Yes, they bring a woman on board, or Diane brings a woman on board to help her get like the terrorist footage, and she's super against it, and is very concerned morally about what that would mean if they were doing it for like the news or whatever. And then by near the end, she's yelling at Diane to get Howard off the air because he's ruining her ratings. And it's just such a great moment. That's part of the reason I think Putney Swope fits right in after this, because it's the radicalization. As soon as it starts having mappable profit margins from advertising, it too falls into the same line.
Yeah, for sure. Performances, I think, are all pretty great. I really like Faye Dunaway for I think she's very consistent and just the she's great. Howard, the guy who plays Howard Beale as well, just so funny. I mean, he has the clearest arc, right, from going to this just sad sack dude into total midlife crisis wacko.
Crazy.
Yeah, pretty fun. Pretty fun transformation.
Yes, I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but is there anything else you want to dig into on the story side or theme?
Give me 1 second. I think I had other thoughts. Well, I guess I should just say that there's a lot of dialogue that I'm still not quite sure what to do with, or how it just fits into kind of the broader themes of the movie, which has to do with Max and Diane's relationship, when they're talking about their relationship as if it were a movie or something like that. I love all that. I think it's very entertaining.
When they're talking about his cocksmanship.
Yeah, exactly. It almost feels like there's kind of a separate, there's kind of a different idea there about, I don't know, us thinking about our lives as if they were entertainment or something like that. That's sort of separate from the primary satire. I wasn't quite sure what to do with all that, but I was intrigued by it.
I think you're right. I believe that their relationship particularly serves as a kind of news feature in the film itself, in which we are watching two people go through the motions of something that we already know the predictive outcome of. And rather than try to sell us on the sincerity of that, the screenwriter very astutely just delivers the goods. In like the first dialogue, where he's leaving his wife, telling her that he's going to come back to her because that's the happy ending that they want, essentially. And there's a few other things that I think kind of fit into that are like mini stories, but that's kind of our feature, other than Howard going mad.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And then the other thought I had, this is just a smaller nugget. There's the joke that Max keeps telling throughout the movie. We hear like a fragment of it at the beginning. You kind of hear the rest of the joke at a later point in the movie. And it's not a joke. It's actually a story about him one time having to like jump in a cab in his pajamas and his overcoat to go to the George Washington Bridge for a story. And the cab driver thinks he's going to commit suicide and tells him not to do it. But just that image of him in that story in his pajamas with the overcoat on in the rain is the same thing that we see Howard do, right? At the one point when he delivers his key slogan. Just a funny little rhyme. I don't know what the idea is there, and there might not be one, but I just thought that was a funny little echo, I guess.
I think that it's more than anything just that echo of craziness, rather than trying to make a point that's deeper.
So. Yeah,
I think the dialogue does all the point making itself, and all the other stuff is just fun repetition. I mean, that could have just been something that Lumet said. Let's repeat that right here.
Yeah, what should you wear? Just go with the PJ thing. Yeah.
Put him in that wardrobe. That's where I think Lumet has really great filmmaking, in that he can take a screenplay and not change it at all, but manufacture the film to accentuate the greatness of the screenplay. I believe he did do quite a few revisions to about half the screenplays, if I'm remembering. I read his book on making movies. And he normally didn't like to mess with the dialogue, but he would often change like locations or times, just customize stuff to try to make it fit into a better spinning top that stays spinning a little bit longer than it would have otherwise.
That's interesting. I think I'd actually heard the opposite. I'll have to check my sources, but I thought this was one where he was, where the script was sacred. And I remember that because one word that got slipped in was in the big slogan where he says, "I'm as mad as hell," and the script says, "I'm mad as hell." I think I read that as just an anecdote with that was one line that actually that's where one little word was slipped in. I could be wrong, but I thought this was one where the script was.
So to be clear, I'm not
script.
saying the dialogue. I'm just saying like the other stuff, like exterior, this, that. Like I think that he really goes in and does a lot of homework to make that stuff work in the setting and all that type of stuff, costume. But like you said, yeah, he sticks to the text of the words. But anything that's not the words per se, I think he has quite a bit of play with.
Yeah. Just to return to where we started with the range, I think I'm with you that for me, it's probably about a 4 out of 5. The only reason is because, well, I don't know if it's really a reason or not, but as you describe the direction, I would think I would describe it in some similar ways. I don't describe it as particularly flashy direction. Seems pretty workman-like. I do think I gravitate towards movies that have just a bit more kind of cinematic style to them. This does feels like an actor's movie, a writer's movie. I could be wrong. Maybe if this just sticks with me, I would up it. But I do personally like something with just a little more pizzazz to the visuals, and to what the camera is doing.
Much pizzazz.
He doesn't, and that's fine. And I think, but the thing is, I think that's right for the material, so I can't really criticize it for that. But I think sometimes that's what gets me up into those upper echelons, I guess, is something that's formally really wows me. And,
more engaging.
Yeah, but that just really doesn't make sense. I don't know that would work for the material all that well. So I might revise upwards at a later date. We shall see.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's definitely one that the rating doesn't really mean as much as the heart.
Gotcha. I like it.
Favorite scene?
My favorite scene is well, I guess I don't know if this is necessarily my favorite, but the one that just immediately pops into mind is when we do get those shots. Speaking of pizzazz, the shots when we see everybody leaning out their windows and shouting, "I'm mad as hell," and
those
I'm
are
not going to
great.
take it anymore.
Those look great.
Yeah, because I think there is like some lightning or something at the moment. Like you're seeing the whole sides of buildings lit up, and the idea that this is, a lightning bolt of a moment, a turning point for the network, I think is pretty good. I'll go with that. What about you?
I will choose the final scene of the film in which you see Howard. He is assassinated by 2 men that have been sent to the network to not only kill him, but also work on the feature story where they can have a great launch to their new series. And as Howard is shot, he lies dying and bleeding, and the camera for the network pushes up on his dead body, and it's such a great shot. I love that shot of just the camera on rollers being pushed up to the dead body of the news host.
Yeah, good ending.
Run! Go! Get to the chopper!
We have to go.
I'm coming with you.
That was brilliant.
You're the best and we love you!
And that's another one in the can.